For generations, Leave It to Beaver, 1957 to 1963, has remained a beloved classic, capturing the charm and innocence of 1950s suburban life. The show introduced audiences to unforgettable characters and wholesome family values, leaving a lasting mark on television history. However, as the decades have passed, many of the actors who brought these characters to life have sadly left us, some under tragic circumstances. From main cast members to guest stars, their lives were filled with successes, struggles, and heartbreaking endings. Join us as we look back at 37 actors from Leave It to Beaver who have passed away and honor their legacies. Barbara Billingsley took on the role of June Cleaver in 1957 at the age of 42, embodying the idyllic 1950s housewife with a calm demeanor and an ever-present pearl necklace. June was the pillar of domestic perfection, always ready with a warm meal and gentle wisdom, an unattainable standard for many real-life mothers. While the world adored her as the perfect homemaker, Barbara struggled with a career that quickly pigeonholed her. Personal happiness eluded her as well. Married 3 times, she experienced the heartache of 2 divorces, the second leaving her financially strained. Her eldest son, Drew, battled substance abuse, and his repeated stints in rehabilitation left her emotionally drained. In her later years, she suffered from painful polymyalgia rheumatica, a debilitating inflammatory disease that left her in constant agony. On October 16, 2010, she passed away at the age of 94, succumbing to the illness that had tormented her in her final years. Tony Dow took on the role of Wally Cleaver in 1957 at the tender age of 12, playing the responsible and athletic older brother whose charm and maturity made him a fan favorite. However, the pressures of fame weighed heavily on him, and as he transitioned into adulthood, he struggled with crippling depression. Hollywood had no use for former child stars, and he found himself bouncing between odd jobs, construction, sculpting, and directing, none of which filled the void of his lost stardom. His first marriage to Carol Marlowe ended in divorce after just a few years, leaving him estranged from their only son, Christopher. In the 1980s, he became an advocate for mental health after publicly admitting to battling severe depression, but the darkness never fully lifted. In 2021, he was diagnosed with cancer, and as the disease spread, his body wasted away, leaving him frail and weak. On July 27, 2022, after days of confusion surrounding premature death reports, Tony Dow finally succumbed to the disease at the age of 77. Hugh Beaumont began his tenure as Ward Cleaver in 1957 at the age of 48, playing the firm but compassionate father who dispensed wisdom to his 2 sons with quiet authority. While his on-screen persona was the epitome of stability, his real life was marred by deep personal sorrow. A devout Methodist minister, Hugh saw acting as merely a job to support his true passion, spreading faith. However, in 1965, his world collapsed when his wife, Catherine Adams, left him after decades of marriage. The divorce shattered his sense of purpose, leaving him bitter and withdrawn. Tragedy struck again when his son, Hunter, was severely injured in a car accident, requiring lifelong medical care. In his later years, Hugh's health deteriorated rapidly, compounded by years of stress and emotional suffering. On May 14, 1982, while visiting his son in Germany, he suffered a fatal heart attack at the age of 73. Ken Osmond stepped into the role of Eddie Haskell in 1957 at the age of 14, crafting one of television's most memorable troublemakers, a polite, insincere charmer to adults but a scheming manipulator among his peers. The role defined him so strongly that it became his curse. No matter what he did, the world saw him only as Eddie. Acting roles dried up, and after a brief attempt to salvage his career, he abandoned Hollywood to become a police officer. In 1980, he was shot 3 times in the line of duty during a chase with a criminal, surviving only because of his bulletproof vest. The trauma haunted him, and he was forced into early retirement due to disability, leaving him with severe PTSD and mounting financial struggles. His marriage to Sandra Purdy remained intact, but he lived in constant fear, haunted by nightmares of his shooting. In his final years, he suffered from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, each breath becoming a struggle. On May 18, 2020, Ken Osmond succumbed to heart and lung failure at the age of 76. Madge Blake joined Leave It to Beaver in 1958 at 59, playing Mrs. Margaret Mondello, the concerned but often overwhelmed mother of Larry Mondello. She had fought against societal norms to become an actress later in life, but Hollywood's brutal nature took its toll on her. Despite roles in Batman and The Real McCoys, she was constantly typecast as the sweet, bumbling older woman, never taken seriously. Her personal life was filled with heartbreak. Married to a man who rarely supported her ambitions, she endured a loveless relationship, staying out of obligation rather than affection. By the late 1960s, her health declined rapidly due to a combination of heart disease and overwhelming stress. She suffered a series of strokes that left her debilitated, forcing her into an early retirement she never wanted. In her final years, she lived in near destitution, unable to work, her finances dwindling, with no one to advocate for her. She died on February 19, 1969, at 69. Stanley Fafara joined Leave It to Beaver in 1957 at the age of 7, portraying Whitey Whitney, one of Beaver's closest friends. A child star with a bright future, his life quickly spiraled into darkness after the cameras stopped rolling. By his teenage years, he was addicted to heroin, spiraling into a life of crime to support his habit. His attempts at a normal life failed. 2 failed marriages, estranged children, and multiple arrests for drug-related offenses marked his tragic downfall. He spent years living on the streets of Portland, reduced to panhandling and stealing to survive. After yet another stint in prison, he attempted to clean up his life, but decades of drug abuse had ravaged his body. In 2003, he was admitted to a hospital for complications following hernia surgery, but his weakened system couldn't fight anymore. On September 20, 2003, he died alone at the age of 53, a forgotten relic of a show that had once painted a picture of wholesome American childhood. Burt Mustin became Gus the Fireman in Leave It to Beaver in 1957 at the remarkable age of 73, portraying the wise and kindly fireman who often lent a listening ear to Beaver. A late bloomer in Hollywood, Mustin had spent most of his life working as a salesman before entering acting in his late 60s. Despite his extensive career, appearing in over 150 shows and films, his personal life was marked by profound sadness. His beloved wife, Frances, passed away before he found success in Hollywood, leaving him to navigate his later years alone. As he aged, his health deteriorated, but he refused to stop working, fearing the silence that would come with retirement. By the mid-1970s, he was frail and barely able to move without assistance. In his final months, he was confined to a nursing home, spending his days in a wheelchair, his body failing him while his mind remained sharp, a cruel reminder of all he had lost. He died on January 28, 1977, at the age of 92 from natural causes. Sue Randall took on the role of Miss Alice Landers in Leave It to Beaver in 1958 at the age of 23. Portraying the gentle, warm-hearted schoolteacher who genuinely cared for her students' well-being. Though her career extended beyond Leave It to Beaver, with appearances in Perry Mason and The Twilight Zone, she struggled to establish herself as a leading actress. In her personal life, she married James J. Hurley, but the union was anything but blissful. They had 2 sons, Blake and Bart, but the marriage crumbled under the weight of infidelity and financial strain, leading to a bitter divorce. As a single mother, she battled loneliness and declining health, all while trying to shield her children from the chaos of her unraveling life. In the early 1980s, she was diagnosed with lung cancer, a cruel irony to her. The disease ravaged her body, leaving her frail and in excruciating pain. She died on October 26, 1984, at just 49 years old. Richard Deacon stepped into the role of Fred Rutherford in 1957 at 35, portraying the smug, condescending co-worker of Ward Cleaver, whose exaggerated self-importance brought comedic relief to the show. Though he became a familiar face with roles in the Dick Van Dyke Show and the Jack Benny program, he never found true happiness. His success was overshadowed by loneliness, as he avoided romantic entanglements to maintain his public image, living a life of secrecy and solitude. His family remained distant, unwilling to accept his reality, and his closest companions were colleagues who only knew the version of him he allowed them to see. In the 1970s, his health began to decline due to unchecked hypertension, exacerbated by years of stress and isolation. He sought comfort in food, leading to significant weight gain, which only worsened his condition. On August 8, 1984, he died alone at 62 from hypertensive heart disease. Claudia Bryar played the librarian in Leave It to Beaver, 1958, at the age of 40, portraying a kind but firm woman who guided the Cleaver boys in their academic pursuits. A veteran character actress, Bryar worked steadily but never gained mainstream fame, her name largely unknown outside of casting offices. Though she remained married to fellow actor Paul Bryar, their relationship was distant, strained by financial struggles and unfulfilled ambitions. They had children, but family life was far from harmonious, with one of their children becoming estranged due to unresolved conflicts. As she aged, Bryar developed dementia, her memories of a long career fading with time. She spent her final years in a care facility, alone and largely forgotten by the industry she had served for decades. She passed away on June 16, 2011, at the age of 93, her death receiving little public acknowledgement, just another name lost to time. Eddie Marr played the bus passenger in Leave It to Beaver, 1957, at the age of 57, a minor but memorable role that contributed to the show's depiction of small-town life. A veteran character actor, Marr spent most of his career in radio and television, often landing minor roles in shows and films that never brought him true recognition. He struggled financially, never achieving the stardom he had dreamed of. His personal life was equally troubled. His first wife left him due to his long absences and financial instability, and his second marriage was marked by constant arguments. His daughter became estranged, resenting his lack of presence during her childhood. In his later years, Marr battled emphysema and struggled to make ends meet, relying on small residual checks and charity from old colleagues. He died on February 25, 1987, at the age of 87, suffering from lung cancer and near obscurity, his passing barely acknowledged by the industry he dedicated his life to. Diana Brewster played Miss Canfield in Leave It to Beaver, 1957, at the age of 26, portraying Beaver's gentle and understanding first-grade teacher. With her striking looks and talent, she was seen as a rising star, but after a handful of notable roles, she abruptly stepped away from Hollywood. She married attorney Guy McClay, hoping for a stable family life, but their relationship grew cold over the years. Though they had a son, Dean, Brewster felt isolated, struggling with an undiagnosed heart condition that left her weak and fatigued. She became increasingly reclusive, rarely appearing in public. By the late 1980s, her health had deteriorated significantly, and she spent her final years confined to her home. She died of heart failure on November 12, 1991, at the age of 60, her once promising career long behind her, and her passing receiving little notice from the press. Madge Kennedy portrayed Aunt Martha Bronson in Leave It to Beaver, 1957, at the age of 66, embodying the traditional, old-fashioned family matriarch who occasionally visited the Cleaver household. Decades earlier, Kennedy had been a silent film star in the 1910s, once celebrated for her beauty and charm, but she struggled to transition into the sound era. By the 1950s, her career had faded to bit parts, and she found herself largely forgotten by Hollywood. Though she remained married to writer William Hanley, their marriage grew cold over time, with Kennedy retreating into a world of nostalgia and regret. She suffered from severe arthritis and declining eyesight, which left her unable to work in her final years. As friends and colleagues passed away, she became more isolated, spending her last years in a nursing home, reminiscing about a career that had long since disappeared. She died alone on June 9, 1987, at the age of 96, her contributions to early Hollywood largely overshadowed by newer generations. John Hoyt took on the role of the clothier in Leave It to Beaver, 1958, at the age of 53, portraying a minor but memorable character who added a touch of class and sophistication to the show. A trained Shakespearean actor with a background in classical theater, Hoyt once had dreams of achieving greater artistic success, but Hollywood relegated him to supporting roles, leaving him forever in the shadows of leading men. Though married to Dorothy Oldman Haveman, their relationship was more of a quiet companionship than a passionate romance, and their home remained childless, adding to his deep sense of loneliness. His later years were marked by professional disappointment, as roles became scarce and he struggled to find purpose beyond acting. A lifelong smoker, he developed lung cancer, and as his health declined, he withdrew from the world, refusing visitors and spending his final months in increasing isolation. He died on September 15, 1991, at the age of 85. Edgar Buchanan played Captain Jack in Leave It to Beaver, 1957, at the age of 54, portraying a charming and adventurous figure who captivated the imagination of the Cleaver boys. Before finding success in acting, Buchanan led an unconventional life, originally working as a dentist before abandoning the profession to pursue Hollywood dreams. His transition was fraught with struggle, marked by years of financial instability and small, forgettable roles in films before he became a well-known character actor in westerns and comedies. His marriage to Mildred Marguerite Spence lasted for decades, but the demands of his career created emotional distance, especially with their son, Buck. Buchanan suffered a series of health issues in his later years, including diabetes and worsening strokes, which left him weak and dependent on others for care. Once a larger-than-life presence, he became frail and withdrawn, his once booming laughter replaced by silence. He died on April 4, 1979, at the age of 76 from complications of a stroke. Katherine Warren portrayed Mrs. Prescott in Leave It to Beaver, 1957, at the age of 52, playing a minor but memorable role that helped shape the show's depiction of suburban life. A hard-working character actress, Warren dedicated decades to her craft but never achieved the fame she had hoped for, often taking whatever small roles were offered to her. She was married to George Roselip, but their relationship was far from idyllic, plagued by years of estrangement and quiet dissatisfaction. Childless and lonely, she immersed herself in her work, using acting as an escape from the emptiness of her personal life. In the early 1960s, she was diagnosed with cancer, but she continued working until the disease left her too weak to perform. As her health declined, she became increasingly isolated, her once active career fading along with her strength. She died on July 17, 1965, at the age of 60 after a long and painful battle with cancer. John Hart portrayed the construction worker in Leave It to Beaver in 1958 at 41, a minor but realistic figure in the show's suburban landscape. Once a promising actor, Hart had briefly taken over as the Lone Ranger in the early 1950s, but his career never recovered after Clayton Moore reclaimed the role. He struggled with typecasting, relegated to minor television roles and forgotten by Hollywood's elite. His marriage to Beryl Braithwaite lasted for decades but was marked by financial strain, as Hart's meager acting income barely supported their modest lifestyle. In his later years, dementia slowly robbed him of his memories, and by the 2000s, he no longer recognized his wife. His final years were spent in a nursing home, where he would often call out for roles he had lost, trapped in a mind that no longer tethered him to reality. On September 20, 2009, at 91, he succumbed to complications of dementia. Henry Hunter played Mr. Briggs in Leave It to Beaver in 1960 at 53, portraying a no-nonsense community figure who contributed to the small-town charm of the show. Though his role was minor, his presence embodied the everyday working-class man, a far cry from the leading roles he once dreamed of. Hunter's career had been in steady decline since the 1940s, and by the time he took on Leave It to Beaver, he was a forgotten relic of Hollywood's golden age, reduced to bit parts and uncredited roles. His personal life fared no better. Twice divorced, his marriages ended in bitter disputes, leaving him estranged from his only son, Robert, who later refused to attend his funeral. As he aged, financial struggles forced him to take odd jobs, working as a security guard in his final years. Alone and largely unrecognized, Hunter passed away on May 25, 1985, at 77, his body discovered in his modest apartment due to heart failure, exacerbated by years of smoking and neglect. Frank Sully played the cab driver in Leave It to Beaver in 1958 at 50, bringing an authentic working-class presence to the show. A character actor by trade, Sully had appeared in hundreds of films and television episodes, yet never received the recognition he craved. Trapped in a cycle of playing drunks, cabbies, and minor background figures, he watched as younger actors surpassed him. His personal life mirrored his professional frustrations. Never married, he found solace in alcohol, which eventually consumed him. Years of heavy drinking led to health complications, and he was often seen stumbling through Hollywood bars, mumbling about roles that never came. As the industry moved on, Sully faded into obscurity, living his final years in a small rental room, surviving on Social Security checks. On December 17, 1975, at 67, he died alone from cirrhosis of the liver, his body unclaimed for days until an old friend identified him at the morgue. And Doran portrayed Agnes Haskell in Leave It to Beaver in 1958 at the age of 47, a motherly character who fit seamlessly into the wholesome suburban world of the show. However, off-screen, her life was far from the warmth her character exuded. Despite a prolific career of over 500 roles, she was never granted leading status, always remaining in the background. She never married, and though she was deeply devoted to her mother, their relationship was strained by Anne's relentless work schedule and her mother's growing resentment toward her career choices. As she aged, loneliness consumed her, and despite being financially stable, she had few personal connections. Her later years were spent battling severe arthritis, making it difficult for her to continue acting. By the late 1990s, she withdrew completely from public life, suffering in silence. On September 19, 2000, at 89, she passed away from natural causes in a small Los Angeles apartment. Ralph Sanford played Fats Flanagan in Leave It to Beaver in 1957 at 58, bringing comedic energy to his small role. A dependable character actor, Sanford worked steadily throughout the 1940s and 1950s, but despite his talent, he never broke into the industry's upper ranks. His weight and gruff demeanor often relegated him to playing burly henchmen or bumbling sidekicks, a fate he resented. His marriage to actress Martha Wentworth ended in an acrimonious divorce, and after their split, he became increasingly withdrawn. Health issues plagued his later years, as diabetes and heart disease made even the simplest tasks exhausting. By the early 1960s, he was struggling to find work, and his savings quickly dwindled. His final months were spent in and out of hospitals, and on June 20, 1963, at 64, he passed away from heart failure. His death barely made the papers, a quiet end to a man who had spent his life trying to be noticed. Lurene Tuttle played Mrs. Brady in Leave It to Beaver in 1959 at 52, portraying a kind and nurturing presence in the show's suburban world. A respected actress in film, television, and radio, she was known for her versatility, but behind her professional success lay a life filled with struggle. Widowed at a young age, she single-handedly raised her daughter, Barbara, while maintaining an exhausting work schedule. Though admired for her talent, she often felt undervalued in Hollywood, forced to take supporting roles while watching younger actresses rise to stardom. In her later years, she battled cancer, enduring painful treatments while continuing to work, unwilling to let the industry forget her. The illness eventually left her frail and in constant pain, but she refused to show weakness, working until her body could no longer endure it. On May 28, 1986, at 78, she succumbed to cancer, her final days spent in quiet suffering. The applause of her audience long faded. Ray Kellogg took on the role of Mr. Donaldson in Leave It to Beaver in 1958 at 39, a minor character who represented the ordinary figures of suburban America. Though he found steady work in film and television, he was never able to break out of minor, often uncredited roles, leaving him feeling unfulfilled. His marriage was strained as he prioritized his career, always believing his big break was just around the corner. His wife eventually left him, taking their only child, whom he barely saw again. Isolated and frustrated, Kellogg turned to alcohol, which worsened his already fragile health. His final years were marked by financial hardship, forcing him to live in a small rented apartment, surviving on modest Social Security checks. In 1981, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, a consequence of years of heavy smoking, and spent his final months in agony. He died alone in a hospital bed on September 26, 1981, at 61. Lyle Talbot played Chuck Dennison in Leave It to Beaver in 1958 at the age of 56, a minor character who contributed to the show's warm portrayal of suburban life. Though Talbot had once been a leading man in early Hollywood, his career had long since faded by the time he took the role, leaving him trapped in forgettable guest appearances. Financial troubles plagued him as his star power diminished, forcing him to take any role he could get. His personal life was equally unstable. After 3 failed marriages, he finally settled with his 4th wife, but the years of disappointment had already taken their toll. He had 4 children, but his relentless pursuit of fading fame kept him distant from them, leading to strained relationships. As the years went by, he battled depression, feeling forgotten by an industry he had once dominated. In his later years, he suffered from dementia, and by the time he passed away on March 2, 1996, at 94, he barely remembered his once glorious career. Who is your favorite character in Leave It to Beaver? How do you feel knowing that the actors have passed away? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thank you so much.